In this video, I'm going to show you how to create your first few cards in an old school or analog Zettelkasten. I'm making this video for the students in a course I teach, a philosophy course called The Examined Life. But I know there are people out there, vast hordes of people, who want to learn how to create their own analog Zettelkasten. So I'm making public some of the videos that I am making for my students. If you would like to see some of the information that I have provided to them, go ahead and click on the link below this video. Just know that the link won't work unless you first hit the subscribe or the like button. Just kidding. All right, let's get started. So I'm having my students create a Zettelkasten for this course that I teach called The Examined Life. So the first card that I asked them to create is this one that you can see here. This card is what I call a folder card, or you could, I guess, call it a category card. The next card that I asked them to create was one for the topic of philosophy, as you can see here. This too, I described to them as a folder or category card. You could think of this card as a folder that itself is in the other card above it, which is also a folder. Then with this third card, still it's a folder or category card. This time it's definitions of philosophy. And just so you know, I like to put the categories in pink so as to clearly distinguish these cards from the cards that I refer to as idea cards, which are the cards that have actual sentences written on them as opposed to just links to other cards or lists of cards that are contained within a particular section. So here now you can see the first idea card, and it has the title Philosophy Equals Thinking About Thinking. I like to put this in blue. I noticed that Jeffrey Weber, who also has videos about note-taking, he puts his titles in blue as well. And this first card actually kind of sucks as a card. So basically it's just the title, and then I list here, so-and-so said this. This person happens to be a colleague of mine in my program. So this isn't a very good card, but what you're going to find when you create a Zettelkasten system is that you're going to mess things up a lot, but it's not going to matter a whole lot if you, as it were, mess things up. You can't mess them up too much, provided you follow some basic ground rules, which I'm not really going to be going over in this video, but just keep that in mind. Messiness is kind of okay. In fact, Niklas Luhmann, the German sociologist who it appears is the one who created this Zettelkasten system, he described his system as both chaos and order at the same time. Now, when you look at the address on this card, that's the number at the top right of each card, you're going to see that with this card that actually finally has an idea on it, I have a hyphen in this address here. So usually, but not always, when there's a hyphen, that means that the card is an idea card. Not always the case, but usually the case. And if there is no hyphen, then that's usually an indication that what you're looking at is not an idea card, but rather one of the folder or category cards. Now, these first few cards that we're looking at, and we're going to look at a few more, were based on a shortened version of the course syllabus that I asked my students to read. So the next card that we created, it's just a quotation. So this too is not necessarily the best of cards to be putting into your Zettelkasten system, but it's fine. Niklas Luhmann himself would sometimes just put quotations on cards, not frequently, but sometimes. And as you can see, the title of this card is Philosophy Equals Criticism. And as I see it, this card is kind of a continuation of the one right above it. So the one right above it says that philosophy equals thinking about thinking. This card, which contains a quotation from the American philosopher John Dewey, points out that the type of thinking we ought to be thinking about is the thinking that consists of very influential beliefs. So since it's a continuation of the previous card, I've put a letter here. So it's 1A. Now I could have just as well, instead of writing 1A at the end, I could have written number 2. And I might make a separate video kind of explaining why I've made the choices I've made, and how those choices, although important, aren't ones you need to be too troubled about. Again, maybe in a separate video I'll go over that. Now this next card definitely is a continuation of the card that contains the quotation from John Dewey, because in the card from John Dewey we see him talking about the importance of calling into question certain influential beliefs in our culture or society. And so I asked my students to create this card titled Influential Beliefs That Should Be Challenged. And I asked them to, off the top of their head, write down 2 or 3 beliefs that they thought should be challenged, beliefs that are pretty dominant in our society. Now you can see on this card that I've made a reference to another card, and it's pink here because it's a reference to a folder card that contains some cards about the relationship between money and happiness. And I have cards on this because the first reading that I'm asking them to do is on the issue of money and its relation, or perhaps lack thereof, some people would argue, to happiness. And then this last card that you see here, which is titled Why We Need Philosophy, this card too consists just of a quotation that is in the short version of the syllabus that I gave to my students, and this is a quotation from John Locke. This card too I see as following in some sense from the Dewey quotation, and so the address has 1A2 at the end here. And as you can see on this card, it begins with the statement, and these are in my own words for the most part, we need philosophy if we are to attain some control over the invisible powers that control us. And then this passage from John Locke points out that these invisible powers, at least the ones that he has in mind, are basically the beliefs that people have. People readily subscribe to the ideas or the beliefs that they hold. And another way of saying that, though I guess it depends on what kind of beliefs we're talking about, whether they're beliefs that are reflectively endorsed or beliefs that you just kind of grew up with and haven't really reflected upon. But the type of beliefs that Locke is talking about are probably the latter, and he describes them here, as you can see, as beliefs that govern people or control people, you could say. So that's how I've introduced my students to the Zettelkasten method. Again, if you're interested in learning more about how I'm teaching the Zettelkasten method to my students, go ahead and click on that link below this video. All right, that's it. Get out of here.